Going on, everybody? Welcome to Real Reviews. I hope and pray that you guys are doing well. If this is your first time here, I would like to welcome you to Real Reviews. What we do here is we examine film through a Christian lens, looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly of film and media. Again, if this is your first time here, make sure you guys click the like button, the subscribe button, and make sure you follow us for really cool good stuff that we talk about. Anyway, so season 4, if you are, again, this is your first time, what we're doing is we're covering cults and mini docu-series and documentaries. So this is what we call the season of the cults on Real Reviews. Also, just to let you know up front, Wednesday, we're going to have another show. It's going to be Apologist in Detroit. We're going to be actually examining the film Gattaca. So be aware, because we're going to be doing a lot of one-on-ones. And if you have any other Christian apologists or other people you would like for me to talk to and do a one-on-one movie review, make sure you drop it in the comments section below. So let me tell you what we're going to be talking about today. Today, we're going to be covering Heaven's Gate, the Cult of Cults. This is, of course, an American documentary miniseries revolving around the religious group. It consists of 4 episodes and premiered on December 3rd of 2020 on HBO Max. This story is actually told through the eyes of former members and loved ones of former members. The series actually follows Heaven's Gate and its leader, Marshall Applewhite. This series included never-before-seen footage of the cult. Now, of course, you know I don't do this alone. I am joined by my illustrious panel, the coolest of the cool, the real reviewers. Welcome to the panel. What's going on, people?
Yeah. What's up?
All right. So let's introduce everybody. Of course, let's start with our cult member, Michelle Turner. What's going on, sis? How you been, and what's going on with the?
My name is not Michelle Turner. It's Fala.
Oh my goodness, you actually have a name. This is why she's the shenanigans of Real Reviews.
I am not. I'm part of the away team.
Oh my goodness. So. You'll understand that hopefully by the end of this this review. Okay, thanks. What is it, Fala or Odie?
Yeah,
Fala Odie or Fodi?
No, just Fala, like T-Do.
Oh, no. Okay, I'm sorry. Forgive me for not understanding your cult wickedness. Okay, so Alfredo, what's going on, man? What you been up to, bro?
Man, I'm chilling, man. Just enjoying my Indigenous Day. You know what I mean? So...
Sweet. Now, you were actually, because we got to talk about it on Real Reviews, you actually had the opportunity to go to Comic-Con in New York City. So what was that like? And should people go? And what did you see anything interesting?
Yeah, it was dope. Make sure you wear comfortable shoes, because they rent out the entire Jacob Javits Center, and if you ever saw the Javits Center, it's just huge. And yeah, it's great. It has everything. If you're into anime, Marvel, Star Wars, DC, if you're more of a figurine collector, they got you. If you're into the actual inkers and drawers of your favorite comic books, they were actually there, and they will draw a sketch for you and sign it for you with, of course, you got to pay for it, but you have an official original piece done by your favorite artist. They actually have some panels. Meet and greets. Oscar Isaac actually was there that Sunday.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Ice-T was there. I don't know why he was there at Comic-Con, but he was there.
He's a comic character. How about that?
I guess. So yeah, man. So if you're a collector of all different things, and especially if you're an anime dude, oh man, it's heaven on earth, because they had so many different booths for anime. Different samurai swords, the wigs, you know, the outfits. It was dope. It was dope.
Cool, man. Cool. Thanks for sharing that with us, man.
Mhm.
And of course, we have to introduce the TA of the UA. I was going to say UUA. I don't know why I said. What's going on, Nate? What you been up to, bro?
Man, you know me. I hibernate in between live streams, and then when it's time for reviews, I wake up and here I am. This time I woke up with a T-shirt that had 2 R's on it. I don't know what happened.
That's the
Just
real,
what happens.
real reviews merch. If you want that dope shirt, make sure you guys go ahead. There are links, hopefully, in the description box below. And he has the mug. So, yeah, that was nice and loud, bro. But yeah, if you want to support the channel, if you want to help the ministry grow and help us do cool stuff, make sure you guys click the link in the description box below for your merch. Pick it out. Okay, so let's just talk about in general. So we're talking about the HBO Max's presentation of Heaven's Gate: The Cult of Cults. Let's just talk in general about it. What did you guys think? Anybody can go first. What were your overall thoughts about the docu-series? Don't all speak at once. I have to pick on somebody. Michelle, the cult member.
I thought it was amazing representation of of how cultural context matters within, because we're like listening to it now, we're like, this is dumb. Why would anybody join something that sounds like this? I mean, people still do today join UFO cults, but like how they kind of started, like it makes sense within the cultural context of their time. Like what was going on during the time UFOs had like kind of just became like a big thing. So we see like so many people was like, wow, this is amazing. I can see this being something galactic is new. It's, you know, out of space and all this other stuff. So I will say they did a really good job of showing how even though we don't really understand it within our context, within their context, it makes a little bit more sense of why someone would follow some of the stuff they say. And plus, for some reason, people are very enamored with the end times. So the moment they were like, oh, we're the 2 witnesses and UFOs, it's like, ooh, spooky. So it's just like you like y'all just believe just any old thing that be going down the pipe. But I really thought they did a really good job to show like how people running from themselves, and they're like what Applewhite's like how his life was, like running from themselves, dragging people running from themselves with them, and cultural context, and how people like they want to feel like special. People want to feel needed. People want to feel special. They want to feel heard. And they felt like, I'm special here in this cult. I matter in this cult. But then it shows like the hurt and the pain that the families endure, and the hurt and the pain that the members who left endure. So you see like the scars that it leaves and the wounds that it leaves, even after everything is said and done and the dust is settled. There's people still dealing with the blowback from being in this cult. So I think they did a really good job of framing like how this got started, like how it made sense to them during their time, and how like being involved in stuff like this really can affect our psyche in the long run.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, you're right. And you know, just to talk about your look a little bit, just so people just don't think you dress like that on a normal basis. But
I do every day.
Oh,
Every day.
But let's talk about your look just a little bit. Okay, so the hairstyle, you have it short for a reason. Why did you decide to just have it short and up?
Because everybody in the cult, like when they without getting too much into it, when they found everybody, they thought it was all men, because literally everybody in the cult had like this really, really short haircut. Like everybody had the same hairstyle. It was like, you know, it looked like a good idea, this hairstyle. And they was like, yeah, let's do it. So they were like very uniform in how they dressed, the shoes they wore, their hairstyle. Like when I say they were very, very uniform, like people neglect aesthetics, and like we see these things, so to us we're like, okay, but they all literally had an aesthetic. Black is always like the end thing to be in. So they had like this black ninja looking outfits. They all had the same hairstyle. They
Same
all had their
sneakers.
little patches.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
the same
Nikes.
Nike Cortezes. Like they all were
Actually, not Nike decades. I was wrong. It's not
decades. Yeah,
Cortez, they're
Nike
decades.
decades. They all had like the same everything.
Mm-hmm.
So like you see them, you knew they were all together because they were very uniform. And in their uniformity, like people like that. Like we neglect like how much like aesthetically pleasing certain stuff look to us.
Mm.
And so like you see people, they're all together, they're in unison, they're on one accord. You want to know more about them. Like even if they have like this hairstyle,
Mm-hmm.
you still want to know more about them because you're like, wow, you got all these people to look like this. I want to know how you achieve that because that is not really the best look, but you still achieve these people all to kind of look exactly alike and change their names to like this weird naming system. So I think they did a really good job with that too because uniformity matters.
Yeah.
But I just was very surprised, like all y'all cut y'all hair like this, like y'all was like everybody was like, you know, it'd be a good look this hairstyle, and I just like I'd have left right then and there at that moment, like you know what, I don't think this is the place for me because this hairstyle is not flattering on me at all.
Oh man. So yeah, I mean, just to talk a little bit about and just add to what you were saying, I mean, that whole uniformity of them looking alike, it is a cult tactic. I mean, you'll see different cults, they have like similar dressing, similar codes. The Hebrew Israelites all wearing the same similar thing when they're out there preaching. It matters, like especially when it comes to trying to represent unity. That's the goal. They're trying to represent that they're united, they're on the same accord, and they use clothing as a witness tool in a sense to try to gather individuals to show that they are united and they're not divided. As if that really divides having different styles, but it doesn't. But the thing is, in a cult, everything has to be done up to the extreme. Alfredo, your overall thoughts about it, man? What you thought about the docu-series?
You know, nothing is new under the sun, right? It's the same playbook over and over again. Because uh the guy that was the expert in cults, like he called them, it was a form of Millerism, right? The Millerites, which of course you got the SDAs and Jehovah Witnesses, the Doomsday cult, you know, the Jim Jones situation, Waco, which was happening at the same time they were going on, right? It's the same thing. It might get packaged a little differently, but it's the same thing. It's, you know, come with us. We got the special sauce. The end is near. We got this teaching that no one else has, right? Which is funny because at first they didn't have much of a doctrine at all.
Right.
And to Michelle's point, the allure was, you know, it's the hippie movement, right? The free love movement. Then you got the sci-fi thing happening, the UFOs, and that was big in it was like a big city conspiracy thing. So if you're in a small town and you're watching your TV and you're watching all this happen, and then here comes this group that moves into town, and they're offering you this UFO religion, you get to be a part of this bigger narrative that you've been watching on your television and listening to on your radio. So that was the allure. It had nothing to do with the doctrine. In fact, you know, it was funny when people would press them on exactly what they believed. They really had nothing to offer them.
Right.
Because they kept asking them, what's different about you guys? And they couldn't answer. Because there really wasn't much different. The only difference was, you know, we're offering a chance to be a part of what you've been seeing and witnessing in the culture at that time. That was the allure at first. So,
you know, it's interesting because you did mention that, and we'll talk about it later as we get into the details. They try to draw a parallel between this madness and Christianity. And they tried to, and they do it very sneakily. Because when I was watching, you know what? I'll save it. But just kind of tune in, guys, because it's a very interesting conversation about it. So, Nate, what were your overall thoughts about it, man? What did you think about it when you watched it? Is there something that stood out to you just in general?
Well, it's funny what you just said, how they tried to do something sneakily. Like, I thought that's what I thought they were doing. And I messaged you guys in the group, I think. And I was like, man, it seems like they're trying to like undermine Christianity. And all of a sudden I felt like it was pretty like overt at one point after I said that to you guys. Like, I think I missed. No, I think I No, I wrote it. I think I wrote it down in my notes, and it was just like, "This is Christianity." I'm like, "Oh, that's like okay, I was right." But this documentary was actually really illuminating because I remember when everything was going down. I think I was like in middle school at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing the Hale Bob comet and all of that. And all that I knew about it was what we were seeing on TV, the clips that they were showing of Marshall Applewhite, and all the bodies with the that they were shrouded after they had did the mass suicide, and they had all the Nikes on. And I remember SNL doing a bunch of jokes on it.
Mm-hmm.
There was one where they showed, I
The
think
Nike
I'm
commercial,
sure a lot of you who
right.
remember it. Yeah, the Nike commercial, right? So
Yeah.
they were showing all the bodies, and obviously everyone's had seen it on the news, and they're showing all the bodies with all the Nikes on there, and at the very end it says "Kids worn by level-headed Christians." So at the time I was like, oh, that was funny. I thought that SNL. I was a kid at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but you're thinking, oh, these guys are crazy. What struck me was I did not realize how far back this movement went. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize they were all the way back in the 70s and what was going on. And I actually, because just before we went into this, I went back and tried looking for some of those old SNL clips, and there was one where they actually showed Ted Koppel talking to Marshall Applewhite. He had made it to the spaceship, and that was funny to me. It was just like, oh, look at that, they made it, and they were with a bunch of aliens, and they make reference to that. But as I was watching the documentary, I felt bad because of like how much of an impact this movement had and how much they affected people. And last week we did Keep Sweet,
Pray.
Pray and Obey,
Mm-hmm.
I think, right? And that one was about the FLDS, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that one, that made me mad
Mm-hmm.
because of what what's his name, Warren Jeffs had done to his followers.
Right.
This one made me sad. It grieved me because the leaders, I think, they were just as broken people. They were searching for something as well, and they were all just. I mean, you feel kind of mad because of what they led them into and what eventually happened and how much that affected people, but you just see there was nothing that it's like they had nothing else. This gave them meaning and this gave them purpose, and that just. You think of the brokenness that they must have felt, the what they were searching for, and how it seems like there was nobody there to show them anything that's of truth and of meaning, which is sad because Marshall Applewhite's father, I guess, apparently was a minister.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of wonder what that kind of relationship was like. I mean, he ends up calling the person who recruits him, I think he ends up calling her his father later on, which is ironic and interesting. But yeah, so I think, if this is, I think this is another documentary that's worth watching. It gives you an insight to how these cults kind of form. And I think it's also good that we're doing this season, because one thing I'm noticing is that these cults, especially the ones that try to have some connection or basis in the Christian scriptures, I think one thing I'm noticing is that I think they take what I think a lot of people would perceive about Christianity, and they take that little aspects that are maybe superficially connected or superficially similar, maybe things out of the Bible, taking scripture out of context, and then magnifying those, or distorting and then magnifying those distortions. And I can see a lot of people looking at what these cults do and thinking, oh, this is what Christianity is, seeing it from the outside and thinking, I don't want any part of this.
Mm-hmm.
These are like extreme versions of it, but I think these are sort of just like hyperbolic representations of what I think a lot of people think Christianity is. And so I think we need to be it just made me acutely aware of how important apologetics is, understanding why it is what we believe, and how what we believe is grounded in truth. It isn't just that we're different, that we're acting a certain way, that seems moral, that it fits certain values that that we have, that there is some grounding in truth, and there is something that makes us different than the other beliefs. The most important being that it's true, but hopefully when you dig deeper into that, you see that we actually have a loving God that doesn't require us to get weird haircuts and commit suicide to get onto a spaceship. I'm being a little bit
a little facetious,
silly,
I
but
got
a little facetious. But it's actually really serious, and I feel sorry for those who are still dealing with it. But I'm sure we'll get into all that.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I want to just kind of let the audience know. Listen, it's 4 parts, right? They're about an hour each. So episode 1 was called The Awakening. Episode 2 was called The Chrysalis. Episode 3 was called The Second Harvest, and of course, episode 4 was called The Exit, which is probably the darkest episode. Of course, it was dealing with the suicides. But the first one, I want to talk a little bit about how the show actually opened up. It opened up with him talking, and you see these kind of blank smiles right when it opens up, talking about him. And I could almost relate, not to the blank smiles, but just to the emptiness that happens to a person when they become part of a cult. And you see that a lot of their individuality, the things that made them who they were, their identity, was stripped away completely. And then it was replaced by this icon of just short haircut, wearing black, wearing glasses. Almost all of them had glasses on, which was weird to me. Maybe they just all needed glasses, but it was just odd that they all had glasses, all had the short haircuts, all wore, very frumpy clothing, as if having style or having any individuality is somehow a sin in their religion. One of the things that really stood out to me was that whole, you have to be the same. And the reason why that happens, and this is for individuals who, are just becoming familiar with cults, the reason why that happens, where they strip your identity, number one, they do that to control you. Because if they take your identity, you no longer have a personality. You're no longer an individual. Now you are part of the system. And even in the series, they talk about it like Star Trek, the Borg. Everybody's the same. As if having individuality somehow makes you different. Like all of us here are in the body of Christ. We're one. But you can tell that from each of us, we all look different. We all behave different. We all have different mannerisms and personality traits and characteristics and all like that. But yet, we still have that individuality, but we are still one in Christ. So Christ doesn't take away the things that make you in a sense, as far as the way you look, your personality. He actually blesses all of us with some type of individuality. The one thing that we do all have to be one in is our faith in Christ, what we believe about him, who he is. That has to be unified. So for me, that was one of the things that stood out for me was, number one, the empty smiles that they had. It was almost like they were in a hypnotized state. But also because their individuality was stripped from them. I also want to make sure that nobody draws that parallel as if Christ is that way, because that's what they try to sneak into here a whole lot. I mean, if we want to, we could jump right into that because there's so much. We can't break it up by episode, but let's talk about, let's jump right into that part first, about them trying to draw the parallel between this cult and Christ. And one of the first things they did, at least when I picked up on it, was when they were saying how Christ, the believers believed in Christ, yet he failed. You see, do you remember that part where they say, "Oh, Christ failed, so they had to come up with something else"? I'm like, you guys didn't read your Bible at all. Like, like he didn't fail. That was part of the plan of him dying and resurrecting. But they drew the parallel and they try to compare the fact that these cults make prophecies that don't come out. And they're trying to say, okay, because of that, that's how Jesus was when he died. And then all the believers had to make something up in order to, that's not the case. I mean, do any of you want to speak to that issue as far as them drawing that parallel to Christ or Christianity?
I'll just say that once T died, I think, so I tried to look at it, not in the, I'm about to fight everybody who made these comments. I tried to look at it differently because I was very upset when he was in there making claims, not knowing nothing. So when T died, it no longer fit we're the two witnesses, where mortal will rise again, and blah blah blah. So it no longer fit that. So Doe had to make T the father, and then he had to be the son, Christ, because he was now continuing on having to be the leader, to be to run the call. So I tried to say maybe they were thinking that she failed, and because she failed and he failed, that's what they were talking about, even though I know good and well that's not what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, there's no, I guess, like the only, like the moment you reference the Bible, and they did reference that they were the two witnesses, because when the first cult first started, it's like UFO, space, woo, and then after T dies, he kind of goes, Doe kind of goes to his Christian roots of his father being a minister, and then he starts incorporating aspects of Christianity into the cult. So where originally they didn't have any doctrine, they now all of a sudden have doctrine. They now all of a sudden have so where he was like the main leader, and because she wasn't like overtly religious, it was more of a let's be free and wild, but run from who we really are, to where he I think he wanted to have his family and wanted to be part of his roots that he grew up in. But I think because he knew he would not be accepted because of his lifestyle that he was living, because apparently he was homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
I think he, instead of fully letting that go, he still embraced the parts of it that he liked, and he incorporated that into their cult. So in essence, their end times UFO Christian cult. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're not Christian, but because they do have these doctrines that reference the Bible, most people will view them as a Christian cult. But you cannot parallel this cult with um, Christianity, because that is not at all what happened. Christ did rise on the third day. We have eyewitness testimony of all these things. Like you have to ignore the historicity of Jesus Christ to make the claims that he made, just saying any old thing. Just like he's like, what's the first thing stupid that can come to my head? This is it, and I'm gonna say it. He did not filter this through truth or reality. But I can see why, like, people who hate Christianity, it's easy to judge it by people who are not actual adherents to Christianity than to actually judge Christianity by the actual adherence to it.
That's true. That's true. Thank you. BK, Nate, as far as like the them trying to kind of like draw the parallels.
Well, first of all, that particular guy, the quote unquote expert,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen him before. Don't like him at all.
Okay.
Like he's completely off, and he knows better because I think he has a doctorate in like church history. So he's the last person that would get that wrong, right? But he's very much a clout chaser in a lot of ways. I've seen him on like Fox News, and you know, so he's a scholar. He's a legit scholar, but he says things to excite certain reactions. Um, what's interesting is that, to Michelle's point, it became more Christian adjacent later on, because at
Mm-hmm.
first it was very new agey, right?
Right.
And she borrowed from Theosophy and Helena Blavatsky, which is funny because it seems like everybody borrowed from Blavatsky, right?
Right.
And it wasn't towards until she passes that you see the pivot to more of a quote unquote mainline Christian model, even though he still had to keep the UFO component, because
Mm-hmm.
that was the hook. That
Right.
was their 12 tribe chart, right? The UFO. You got to keep the UFO, and actually, and they finally did like started collecting their doctrine and writing out their belief, and you can actually find it on the website. The website still is running, guys. I was like, I just found it. I'm like, let me put it in the chat real quick.
Yeah.
The website, someone's paying to keep this website going still, right? But here's if I could just read this real quick.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Doe. It's called the intro purpose belief, what our purpose is. Let's see if you could figure out. There's an old heresy that he slips in here. Let's see if you guys could find it. It says here, the simple bottom line: 2,000 years ago, a crew of members of the kingdom of heaven who are responsible for nurturing, quote, gardens, determined that a percentage of the human plants of the present civilization of this garden, Earth, had developed enough that some of those bodies might be ready to be used as quote unquote containers for soul deposits. Upon instruction, a member of the kingdom of heaven that left behind his body in that next level, similar to putting it in a closet, like a suit of clothes that doesn't need to be worn for a while, came to earth and moved into or incarnated into an adult human body or quote unquote vehicle that had been quote unquote prepped for this particular task. That body that was chosen was called Jesus,
Wow.
the member of the kingdom of heaven who was instructed to incarnate into that body so that his father or older member's instruction, he quote unquote moved into or took over that body when it was 29 or 30 years old at the time referred to its baptism by John the Baptist. The incarnating event was depicted as quote the Holy Spirit descend upon him bodily form like a dove, Luke 3:22. That body named Jesus was tagged in its formative period to be the receptacle of a next level representative. And even just that tagging gave the vehicle some unique awareness of its coming purpose. What's the heresy there? What heresy is he teaching there? Anyway.
I'm trying to figure it out because number one, it sounds completely mixed. Like the way,
It sounds like Scientology.
yeah. Well, it sounds like, so when I'm hearing this, I'm hearing a whole bunch of gibberish that doesn't make any sense. So it's hard for me to even pinpoint. And sometimes these cults do that. They just fill and throw in a whole bunch of language. So you're gonna have to tell me because I totally missed it. Like,
it's a form of adoptionism.
Okay.
Right? Because people who believe in adoptionism, they use that scripture in Luke as a proof text that, like, Jesus didn't know he was divine until he got zapped.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I got you.
Right? So that's adoptionism. But in this version is this space age representative moved in to Jesus' body at that time,
right?
Because it was ready to. It was a useful vehicle at the time. So the vehicle had no idea that it was going to be what it was until that moment. So it's a take on adoptionism.
Yep, CMB caught it, and Shoddy Mills. Good job figuring it out. And just talking about that, like there are some movies, I can't remember who the actor was, but where he discovered that he was Jesus, or he discovered that he was God. He figured it out. So it's again, it falls under that same line of thinking where Jesus wasn't always Jesus. Jesus wasn't always God. He became God later, or something entered him, or again, so that's a good term for everybody to kind of pick up. So thanks for that, Alfredo, for teaching the audience what adoptionism is. And it's slick because even with cults, the whole thing isn't to give you an understanding, to help you to understand what's going on, but to confuse you so much beyond point of recognition that you just accept it, hoping that they're right. Because even when you look at a lot of these cults, the whole thing is, I think Mr. Green puts it, because I asked the question earlier, has anybody watched the Docu-Series? If so, what stood out to you? And Mr. Green says, loneliness. They all seemed so terribly lonely. And that is, thank you for that, Mr. Green, because that is what you call a foothold. That's something that you're feeling. And because you're feeling that way, you want to quench that loneliness, that you're willing to accept any doctrine, just to be a part of a community or a family. And that happens more often than you think. It's called groupthink, right? You don't want to offend anybody. You want to be part of the group. You want to stay a part of the group, so you don't say anything to kind of wreck the peace. And that was one of the things I was afraid of. I was afraid of leaving the cult I was a part of because of that very reason, of being alone, not having family, not having friends. And doing that is, you just stay because you're just afraid to leave. And a lot of them dealt with that. But there was also one other reason that they joined, that they mentioned in the documentary. I don't know if you guys caught it. I'm pretty sure you guys probably did, though, is they were part of many other different religions before they became part of this. It's not like they were very solid biblical Christians, and all of a sudden they got deceived into believing in this. They actually practiced a lot of new age beliefs prior to joining this group. So their mind and their spirits were prepped for this kind of deception. I don't know if you guys saw that when they talked about it or if you noticed it. No? Okay. Go ahead.
And they also did touch on groupthink too. They
Mm-hmm.
showed the study where even if you realize like only one person wasn't in on the study, and if everybody else picked one, even if you knew it was two, more than likely everybody you would follow what everybody else thought and would pick one. And it was like a lot of times we think we're independent, we think we wouldn't fall for these things, but in these studies it shows that even the best of us would still go with what the group wanted because we don't want to look like we're stupid or we're going against the grain.
You know,
I mean,
go ahead.
the founder, right? She was very synchronistic in her
Mm-hmm.
theology. So, yeah, she pulled from multiple sources, to make what she had with these guys later on. So,
Which probably led to the appeal, well, to its universal appeal to different people, was that it had so many different things that you were sure to find something that you might like or agree with, and that's why I think it's important, like to show that Christianity is not that way. We're not trying to appeal to a whole bunch of people by trying to bend our belief system in order to make you happy, or trying to do like this universal spiritualism. No, Christianity is this is why when Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father but through me, it was a pronounced exclusive statement. There is no other way. Like, you can't find another way. I mean, even when he talked about, you can only enter in through the straight gate, the narrow path. There's no other way you can kind of come into this. And so, it lends to this idea that that's one of the biggest differences between this cult and actual Christianity, is that Christ is very exclusive in stating that you must trust and believe in him, not anything that you feel is right. And many of their beliefs contradicted Christ in many different ways throughout the whole thing. Another thing I just want to say real quick is I like that they repeated this a few times throughout the documentary, and that people spent 20 to 22 years being indoctrinated before they actually committed suicide at the end. So, some people might think it's crazy that these people would do these crazy things, but you don't understand. It was over a period of time. It wasn't right away. It wasn't like the first week they were full-blown hardcore believers. It was an indoctrination, a slow deception over 20 years. It's kind of like a kid growing up with two parents that, are, let's say, atheistic. The kid, most likely, because he's been surrounded by that his whole life, he trusts his parents. Most children trust their parents. And so they're most likely, not 100% definite, but most likely they're going to become very atheistic in their beliefs, or at least have that before, hopefully, changing. And, so that was one aspect that I thought was interesting, was they mentioned that it was over a period of time. Because, we watching this documentary is 4 hours, and we're catching like 20 some odd years of somebody's life in 4 hours. So, for me, when I was a part of the cult, it didn't take me, a month. It was a period of time. And then it also takes a period of time to leave. And the one thing I'll say, and I'll let you guys go. The one thing that I love that the guy said, and I wanted to buy his book dealing with cults and stuff, because he has a lot of really good insight. He said that just because you physically leave the cult doesn't mean it leaves your mind. And I thought that was so profound in saying that, because so many people think that just because somebody left the group, that's it. We talk about that. Alfredo mentions that a lot. What do you do after salvation? After a person is saved, like, what do you do? Now it's time. Now the work begins. And so for these individuals, when it comes to cults and stuff like that, we need to make sure that we're available to people after they make that wonderful decision to follow Christ out of a cult, because it's still a lot of hard work afterwards. But that's all I had to say about that. Any thoughts?
I will say about the cult holding on to your mind. At one point, when they were close to, letting them own self go to the UFO, I guess, they had ex-members, they like did stuff and put stuff in place for ex-members to keep their intellectual property together, which is why I'm not surprised the website is still up, because 9 out of 10 is being still hosted by an ex-member. But they ensured that everything was in place for their message to keep going even after they ascended to the UFO. So I was like, that kind of like, they didn't ask just like any random person. People that knew what they were doing, knew what the cult believed, even though they had left, was still okay with, you know what, I'll still spread this message because deep down I want to believe that this could still possibly be real. Like, even though I left, like, I have to believe that I wasn't this kind of gullible to not see through this. So they ensured that their message would keep going through ex-members. It wasn't just like arbitrary. So I can see how your mind could still be held by that, because we still see 20 something, almost 20 something years now that they left, that their website is literally still up and going. You can still buy like their patches and stuff like that online. So you can see how it's still like remnants of it is still here.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for saying that. There is, Nate, did you have anything to add at all? I didn't want to overtalk you. I want to give you a chance to.
Well, one thing I did want to point out, they try to draw parallels, at least at one point, with Christianity, and kind of make it as, I mean, they're basically they were trying to make Christianity out to be a cult, and how it was just trying to, I mean, what the guy, it was Reza Aslan, for those who are wondering. And I know that people had issues with him. I was trying to be a little bit not to be open-minded, but he kind of lived down to the expectations. Sorry, but he basically, he said that that when the founder T died, they had to kind of readjust their doctrine, and they said that's what Christianity did. That, oh, there was Christians took this idea of Messiah, and when Jesus died unexpectedly, they had to change the doctrine to what Messiah means. Which, one thing I want to point out about that section was, it's like, why are you giving this guy's interpretation of Christianity? And it that seems a little bit like an agenda that you're giving. I mean, to have one guy say this in a documentary, if you're giving different views, is one thing, but to say, look, Christianity is just like the Heaven's Gate cult, that's a little sus. I mean, it was only this one section that they kind of explicitly did that. But what's funny is that leading up to that, I did notice that as the people were talking about why they joined the cult, or why their families members joined the cult, it struck me that it's possible that there are similar situations why people may join a church and why they may accept Christ, not because they see that it's the truth, but it feels some kind of emotional need, and they may find community, or the idea that's being presented by this church, the generic sermon that may be preached, which are not maybe necessarily heresy, but again, like they bring up, is like, what's the difference between you and this other group, and what these other Christians or pseudo Christian groups are saying. There may be people who join because of that, and we don't necessarily question, I guess, or we're just happy, oh, they've joined the church, they've said the sinner's prayer. And so this, we see them joining this group, and they think, well, how can you join that group? It's crazy, because we see the haircuts, we see the mass suicide at the end, we see the I mean, they call this, the documentary was called Heaven's Gate, the Cult of Cults, because this is, they represent what we think of when we think of cults. And I think, I don't know how many other cults are similar to them. Or I feel like a lot of the parodies that we see of cults are based on what they did,
right?
And the kind of clothes that they're wearing. And so it's easy to look at them and say, how can anyone fall for this unless you're like mentally ill or something like that? But it just struck me, if you tweak some things a little bit differently, they could almost seem Christian in some aspect, in some superficial way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some people who have joined the church or joined a church and then eventually left when the novelty, wore off, when they didn't, maybe they didn't get the community that they were really looking for, or it just it proved to be superficial and they left. They could probably think, well, this is probably not that dissimilar to when I joined this local community church, and it was fun for a while, going to the potlucks and hearing the sermons and being encouraged on Sundays and singing the songs. um but then came back to reality, and you see some of the ex-members from the cult, from the Heaven's Gate cult, and they might see something that's not too dissimilar to what they to their journey in and out of a Christian church,
Mm-hmm.
which may be filled with legitimate believers. I'm not saying that they themselves are some kind of Christian cult, but so on the one hand, I was kind of mad that they're trying to equate Christianity with Heaven's Gate, almost trying to the way kind of like we might say Mormonism is a cult of Christianity. It's almost like Riz Aslan was trying to say, oh, Christianity is a cult of Judaism. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like what he's trying to do and trying to pit us. And I think this guy supposedly identifies as a Muslim, though I think some Muslims, or I think a lot of Muslims disagree with that. So I don't know where he's coming from in terms of all that. But on the one hand, we as Christians can be kind of upset that they're trying to draw these parallels, but at the same time, what kind of how is our faith merely a cultural thing because we just grew up in it, and do we just sort of accept these basic ideas that we just grew up with that seem normal? Or is there something real? Is there something that we are truly understanding that is true about what we believe and that is life-changing? Because otherwise, if we're just cultural Christians, I mean, there's the word cult there in culture, and it's kind of scary that it's like almost like we are somebody who grew up in a church could be sort of almost like in a cult, not this extreme, just because it just fits. It's what feels normal. And I mean, you look at there was the guy Sawyer. He was talking about how he was struggling with masturbation, and you kind of think about purity culture back in the 90s, and it's just like, oh, I got to stop doing this, got to confess it. You hear them talking about check partners, and I was just like, that sounds a lot like when we talk about accountability partners, which is not it's a good thing, I think, to have an accountability partner, but it's also very easy, I think, for a lot of churches to have an accountability. You say you need to have an accountability partner because that's a kind of a cultural thing. You find an accountability partner or an accountability group, and you can kind of just it can easily just be this thing. It's like, oh, I haven't done my devotions as much, or I haven't been praying as much, and that's what it is. You make sure you do all these Christian-y things where it's not really about keeping accountable in any, to really following the actual path. And I think what struck me is just like the way I think some of us do Christianity is what makes it easy for a lot of these cults to counterfeit what is true Christianity. And I think we need to do a better job at understanding what it is we believe, especially those of us who've grown up in the faith, like I have. I grew up in the church. I've stayed in the church, and I only started realizing recently how a lot of what I believe is just sort of accepting on maybe some superficial level what was just cultural. I think some people would call it like churchianity or something like that. And so now I'm trying to really understand my faith on a deeper level in a way that I can articulate. But yeah, it's crazy. There isn't that, in a way, that there's almost a blurred line between the cult and the way some churches do things, and I think that was kind of scary. So on the one hand, it's like, Razor Aslan, what are you trying to do? On the other hand, it's like it's not the same as the church, but it's the same as the way I think some people do church, and I think that should be sort of a wake up call.
Yeah, and you're definitely right on everything. I mean, everything you said was impactful, but Like one of the things I want to kind of talk about, because Roxby asks a very good question, and it kind of jumps off what you were talking about as well, is do most cults do they form a kind of a buddy check system? You know what? In a lot of ways, yes. But it's not like how Nate was talking about, like having an accountability friend or somebody you can be held accountable to in the way that they're supposed to be there to support you when you struggle and things like that. Their kind of system is more to make sure you stay in line. I've had conversations and I've heard many testimonies about ex Jehovah's Witnesses where everybody is putting a smile on their face because if somebody is thought to be going off, they have already been kind of programmed and taught that if they witness somebody doing something wrong and they don't say anything, they are just as guilty and they can be kicked out the church as well, or their congregation, or whatever they want to call it. So what does that do to the environment of their system? Well, everybody starts to try be on their P's and Q's and not show any fault, because the moment somebody does, that's it. You could be reported. And so it's more of a fear-based tactic to keep everybody in line versus what we do as Christians. If let's just say I say, hey, Nate, can you help hold me accountable for X, Y, Z? Nate's not going to just look at me and just say, okay, I'm going to pick on every little thing SOC does wrong, and then I'm going to report it to someone else. No, he's like, okay, let's work through it. Let's talk about it. That's how it's supposed to be done. But a lot of these cults take it to a whole different extreme and say, okay, we're going to control you by having little controllers around, and kind of like, imagine how you would behave if everywhere you went had a camera, like just right on you all the time. You wouldn't be like yourself to some degree because you're always afraid of what other people are going to think of you. What are they going to perceive about you? You wouldn't maybe relax the way you usually would, because you would say, oh, well, depending on how I relax, this person might think I'm doing this. And now you're questioning every little thing that you do. So instead you just sit there with this mind of, I'm not going to move. And so it paralyzes you. And now again, falling back into, you no longer have any individuality. You're now a part of the Borg, the Star Trek, the whole Star Trek thing. There was one thing that kind of caught my attention, and it was this feeling of euphoria that they talked about. And I definitely want to say that happens in church, in different churches, where they have this emotional feeling, and they take that emotional feeling and use it as doctrine to teach people things that are false. You know, walking around just passing out. Like, where in scripture do any of the apostles do any of that? Now, this is, again, this type of euphoria. Oh, it feels good. I'm excited. My heart's pumping really fast. This must be a good thing. And then I'm going to take that feeling and build a doctrine off it. That's where it becomes, this is where you get cults like this. Because these individuals walked in, they were at a meeting, and they saw somebody, and then they got this happy, excited feeling. But that tends to come a lot. At least from my examination, the New Age movement. It's a lot of that euphoria, the feeling, that moving around, that, you know, and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff. I talked about that in one of my old SOC videos. But I want to ask you guys, have you witnessed anybody kind of start building doctrine off of euphoria? And did you notice when they talked about it, what was some of your thoughts and ideas about what they were talking about when it came to the whole euphoric feeling and things like that? Not everybody at once.
I mean, I don't think I've noticed anyone specifically building doctrine off of having a feeling of euphoria. And I don't think necessarily having that feeling is wrong. Like, I think that could be a genuine response to just knowing what you believe is true, or you know, I think somebody could be, you know, go to church and be singing the song and just be reflecting on what the significance of the song, the praise and worship song, and actually be feeling that. Right. Now, that doesn't make it true or not. What it makes me think of, though, is that you also have I guess it's the Mormons who talk about the burning in the bosom. Right. It kind of makes me think of that. Excuse me. Where you have this feeling, and not today, Satan. Let me take a drink.
There you go. Plug. All right,
Mug. Yeah. No, but you have the burning of the bosom, right? And one thing it makes me think of is that you could I think you could point to other Christians who may build their own doctrine off of that feeling. Well, they may believe the same things that we say we believe, and they may believe that because of what they feel, because of what they make it that euphoric feeling when they go to church, when they sing their praise and worship songs, when they're with their with fellowshipping with other, who could be true Christians. And then maybe something really bad happens, somebody has cancer, and then they don't suddenly their doctrine falls apart because it's based on their feeling, and what the happiness that they thought they were going to get is no longer there. But the thing is, it doesn't, Christianity doesn't promise that you will have that feeling all the time, that you won't suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that I thought about is, okay, yeah, you're going to have some people who join for emotional reasons, join the church, who will join what's true. You'll have people who join Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Heaven's Gate because of emotional reasons, and not and then leave when they get disappointed. And naysayers are going to point to that and say, what is different between Heaven's Gate and Christianity? Because people, they get that, they got this euphoric feeling that these people apparently are getting too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say that's, I'm sure there's a specific fallacy that's joined to, but just because people believe in something or join a religion for the wrong reasons does not, or for the same reasons, I should say, which could be the wrong reasons, does not make the thing that they claim to adhere to wrong, right? I mean, somebody could join Mormonism because it felt good. Somebody could join Christianity and claim all the tenets of Christianity because it felt good. It does not make any of those things false, mm-hmm. right? But yeah, so that's the point I wanted to make. Was like, okay, you could point to somebody building off doctrine for euphoric reason, or building their belief on euphoria, but it does not make what they believed in or claim to believe in, or maybe superficially claim to believe in, mm-hmm. False. And I think that's something that a lot of people could try to parallel, that a lot of people could try to make and say, see, Christianity is no different. It's like, well, no, people may join for the same reasons, but it doesn't make the source any less true or false.
That's good. For me, I feel like, to piggyback off what he said, I can see how people can develop a doctrine based on feelings, but I think what we also see is the feelings themselves are the doctrine.
Right.
Because the doctrine is so paper thin, the thing that keeps people in isn't the intellectual pursuits, but it's the feeling. A perfect example is a lot of the One West, denominations, right? Mm-hmm. Their emotion is anger, right? Because the doctrine is paper thin. I mean, you chop it up every video. You killing it, mm-hmm. right? So it can't be just a doctrine. It's the anger.
Right.
So as long as I stay within my anger, they stay in the group. Because that's the doctrine, the anger, the emotion. So for these guys, it's this feeling of peace, but they can't articulate why they feel this. Because again, when they decided to be more evangelistic and they try to become, Doe and T apologists, and they would actually have these open sessions where people can ask them questions. When they're pressed to articulate what they believe, crickets. It's crickets. They had nothing because they were so caught up in their little echo chamber, and the echo chamber was really just about, hey, I feel good. Don't you feel good? Yeah, I feel good. And they all convinced each other to feel good.
Yeah.
But now to say, well, why do you feel good? they couldn't say. They could not say. So.
No, you're definitely right. And I definitely want to make that that's a good point too. Shotty Mill said, that's good, BK. And so it's extremely important because you can build when you're in an echo chamber and everybody agrees with you. You feel like you're solid because everybody agrees. The second somebody says something different and you're not able to communicate why you believe what you believe, you start to witness your doctrine fall apart, and your foundation starts to crumble. And a lot of these groups, the cults, especially Heaven's Gate, they didn't build upon the rock the way Jesus said to build. They didn't build upon Christ. Christ wasn't the central figure in this cult. It wasn't about him. It was about T and Do, right? They were the leaders. They were the ones that made people feel a certain way. We get our wisdom and knowledge from them. We do what they say. It wasn't about Christ. So T and Do are sand. And as soon as things started getting a little shaky, everything started crumbling and falling apart, all the way to the point where they died. And not only them, and this is the scary part we have to talk about, is that even the individuals who left, 2 of them committed suicide after all of them did it because they felt like they were being left behind. And the other one, which was a sad story, was Sawyer. Sawyer, at the end, he was still a believer. He felt like he failed the test. Their test, not Christ or any. He felt like he failed T and Do. That when they left and they committed suicide, he felt, man, I'm left behind and I have to figure out how to make up for it. And so he's still indoctrinated by it, even after seeing all of this. And I think, we as Christians need to understand, again, just because the leader goes or just because they're out of the group, it doesn't mean that people are not still dealing with some of those doctrines. One of the things I tell people is when I left the group I was a part of, it took me about 6-7 years to unpack all of that. There were many times where I wanted to run back just because I was alone. I was like, man, maybe I should go back. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they're right. And all these things start swirling in your head and you have no sense of peace. And so this is why it's so important that your faith is built not upon what you feel, but what's true. Because if I did what I felt, I would have went back because I was emotionally pulled by those things and the people that were there. I was emotionally pulled. And if I let my emotions direct me, not that you can't have emotion, right? And hopefully nobody earlier took it wrong that I'm saying that a Christian cannot be emotional during a song in church or start to cry or even fall on their knees and weep. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is do not let your emotion, kind of like what Alfredo was saying earlier, be the thing. Don't let your emotion be your doctrine. Let it come from true doctrine, right? So I get passionate. I mean, you guys have seen me get passionate. You guys have seen me tear up. But those things, those emotions aren't my doctrine. It flows from my love for Christ and what he's done and opening my eyes and mind. And so please, I hope nobody took it wrong. I'm not saying don't be emotional. Don't let your doctrine be based on emotion, but rather on who Christ is and what he taught. Let me see. There was a comment here. Roxby, she said, I have seen people feel disappointed and like God isn't near because they aren't having those emotional highs. I struggle with that kind of disappointment too at times, right? And that's the thing, because sometimes people in church or people in groups can make you feel guilty for not feeling a certain way or not expressing yourself a certain way. Like some people are more emotional or some people pray very loudly. Nothing wrong with that. But if there's a brother or sister who's not the same way, who maybe is more quiet or more kind of held in, or, some people might say a little more introverted, you can't make them feel guilty because they don't respond the same way other people do. And that's, I think a lot of the time that happens even in church, or it happens in groups just in general. I mean, even if you go to a sports game, if everybody's cheering and you just sitting there, oh, you don't care about this team. You ain't happy. You ain't excited. But you may really be excited, but you're like more focused on certain things. This is where that individuality comes in. This is why in cults like Heaven's Gate, everybody had to behave the same way. Whereas in Christianity, everybody doesn't have to behave the same way, but we all do have to worship the same God. That, and how we do that can look different. It could be sitting there silent. A lot of the time people stand up in church and I sit down and I listen to the music and I close my eyes and I think. That's how I worship, because I'm contemplating the words of the song, or I'm contemplating the message. And there's other people who stand up and they throw their hands in the air and they weep, and that's okay too. And so, I just want to tell everybody, listen, it's okay to be different in Christ, so long as you're worshiping the one true God, in a biblical way, of course, in a biblical way. Let me see. There is something, we talked about this during Interstellar, when I think me and you, BK, we went full throttle on Interstellar, but they were talking about this idea of utopia. You remember when we talked about that in Interstellar, but they also talked about this whole utopian feeling of this perfect world. And the whole thing is, it's about them trying to establish a perfect world rather than waiting on Christ to establish that perfect world. And because of that, because of their attempt to try to establish a utopia, they try to kind of indoctrinate or force people to believe certain things that are not right, in order to kind of create this this false world, this false fake utopia that, anytime a human's in charge, it's never going to be it's never going to be paradise the way it is when God establishes it. Let me see, what else stood out to you guys in the film?
For me, I said it just now, kind of, they started losing members, right? So they went into this serious evangelistic push, and they were very creative, right? They started taking advantage of the internet. The internet was just popping. It just started, the internet forums and everything. So they were actually forward thinking with that, so. And we know that a lot of cults now have taken a page from their playbook, and they've been able to grow their organizations via the internet. I can tell you times where I'm in the street and I'll see a Hebrew Israelite camp, and nobody's there listening to them, but they got the camera, right, and the camera's pointed to them, not to the because there's no crowd, so you can't point to the crowd. There's nobody there,
not to the sidewalk,
right, but to them. But they upload that same video where nobody was physically listening. Now they got thousands of people listening to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the point. They don't care if people in the streets are listening. They know people online will listen to them. But the problem here, nobody was really listening to these guys.
Right.
And the fact that, they actually show in documentary the actual video footage of people pressing them. And they're like, yo, you got nothing. Like, one guy was like, I know as much about you as I did when I first came in the room.
Yeah, which was nothing, right?
Nothing. And literally people are getting up and walking out. And that's when you start seeing them really starting to focus more on the exit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, yeah, this is not working anymore. This is like there was always a turnover rate, because they were never a large organization. I don't know if they ever passed the 100 mark. But they had somebody. But it got to a point where it's like, all right, we got the radio program, we're on the internet forums, we're doing the meet and greets, and it's not working, right? Whereas for a Christian, when I share my faith, whether or not the person accepts it, that's on them. I didn't fail.
Right.
As a Christian, I didn't fail. Failure is me keeping my mouth shut and not sharing the gospel. That's failure.
Right.
Whether or not they accept it, that's on them. I did my part. For them, that wasn't enough. It's like, no, you have to be with us. You got to do these things. You got to get the short haircut. You got to rock the Nike decades. That has to happen for us to be successful. You know what I mean? And for us, it's like, as long, listen, I'm saved. I'm giving you opportunity to have the same salvation. If you don't want it, well, that's tough to be you. You know what I mean? So it's a whole different mindset. It's a totally different mindset.
Yeah. What did you think about? I was kind of heartbroken over it, and I know Roxby was heartbroken over it, because we talked a little bit about it in the Patreon group about T's daughter. That was heartbreaking. Like, she didn't get to be with her mother when she passed away. That relationship, but then and we'll talk a little bit about it, I'm sure, afterwards. But let me just get your thoughts, like, on T's daughter's relationship with her mother. And, well, I guess maybe the absence of the relationship with the mom, and her witnessing all these things. Like, Did that kind of conjure any like emotional feelings in you guys or catch your attention in any way?
T was a hypocrite, and I stand by that statement.
Right.
Because he was writing her daughter, well, according to her daughter, if what her daughter says is true, which I don't have a reason to not really believe her daughter, but her daughter has um she has a memory of what her mom was before she became T. She has a memory, I think her name was Brenda. Her real name is Brenda. She has a memory of Brenda. She doesn't know T. And so all her memories are filtered through Brenda. So she's like, oh, my mom was writing me and saying all these things and was telling me to, live my life and enjoy my life and all this other stuff. But I'm like, but you have these people thinking that they need to um off themselves to go to a UFO. Why would you tell your daughter this if this is what you truly believed? You would stand firm on that. And I do believe if she really wanted her daughter to be there when she was when she had cancer and like at her last moments, if she was writing her daughter as much as her daughter said, I think she would have wrote her daughter and told her like, hey, this is what's going on with me. Can you come be with me, or this is what's going on with me, I want to come home. She was the leader. She ran, everything was ran through her. So it's not like she was some small member who was scared to get out or anything like that. If she really wanted to go and build her daughter, I believe she would have. I don't think her daughter can fathom in her mind that her mom wouldn't want her to be there with her, because I think she said she found out almost a year after her mom had passed away, that her mom actually passed away. And I was like, that's terrible. I can't imagine my mom being gone and I wasn't able to like grieve her properly, be there for her or anything like that. But I was like, I do really feel sorry for her. Like, even to this day, you could tell that he wants to blame everybody else for what her mom was doing, but her mom was the actual leader though. So it's like you want us to um you want us to see Brenda. We don't. We see T. So it's like we can't, like, as much as we sympathize with you, the woman that you're painting a picture of is not the woman that everybody else came to know. And so it's like I feel bad because she is still it's like when people are in battered relationships, like they want to believe like the person that I met who initially was so sweet and wined and dined me is the person that's going to come back, even though this person is now abusing me. Like they want to believe beyond hope, like, well, eventually maybe the person that I fell for is the person that I come back. And I just believe she really wanted her mom to come and be. But even when she was like, oh, the conversations me and my mom had, and she would be like, look at the stars, we're gonna be in the stars. Like her mom was kind of already giving her hints, like, I already believe in this kind of outer space UFO thinking, and this is where my mind is at. When you talk about something a lot, that's typically what your mind is focused on, is what you actually believe, is what you have your hope in. And she was like, her mom and her had these conversations all the time. Yeah. And like looking at the picture of her mom when she was a nurse, like her picture, she didn't look happy. Looking at her mom as T, her mom actually looked happy. So it's like even in her pictures, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm fake happy. You could tell the difference in her smile. It was very genuine when she was T. So I think T was the person her mom actually wanted to be, but Brenda's the person that her daughter wanted her to be.
Yeah, that's some good insight, because it was interesting, because looking at T's daughter, like she was stuck at Brenda, like she didn't know T the way everybody else knew T to some degree. She was told, I think Roxby shared, she says she found out 9 months later because members of the group told her about Brenda, right? But she, they described her as T and all this stuff. And it was heartbreaking because, of course, I thought about my mom during the time, and she had this vision of who she was prior to this madness kind of going full throttle. But then afterwards, you can tell that the heartbreak was still there, even after all that stuff happened where her mom died. Let's talk a little bit about, since we are on T, the secret message letter that she sent her daughter. What were you guys' thoughts about that, about the info that she shared with her daughters secretly, it seemed? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Okay. So basically, what ended up happening, she wrote her daughter a letter and said, basically, I guess to summarize it is, go ahead and live in the world and do what you want to do. Go fulfill your dreams and go to school and things like that, which was totally contrary to the way they were teaching on the cult. So it seemed to some degree that her mother was trying to secretly communicate with her to stay away from this and to go live your life, which was like code, which was kind of creepy to some degree. Is, did she know that what she was doing was wrong and she didn't want her daughter to be a part of it?
She's
Or
a hypocrite.
or did she, or like you said, she's a hypocrite? Or did she start witnessing how it started getting really scary and maybe she didn't want to take it that far, but she did? Like, I don't know. It's confusing to me as to why she would have wrote that. But it is almost like it's almost like a peaceful, not a peaceful thing. It's kind of like an olive branch to her daughter. Almost like that's what I'm thinking. It's like an olive branch. Like, listen, I still love you, but just stay away. Or it just, I don't know. It was confusing, but I don't know. What do you guys think about that part? Like, what did you think? Did you think that she was just being hypocritical, or was there something behind the message? I don't know. What do you guys think about it?
I mean, I would have to go by what the daughter said, that the mom was caught within this tension of, she had this idea of how this group and this belief would be, but then it wasn't what she thought it was going to be. And also, all of a sudden she was reminded of her mortality because of the cancer that she has. So that changes her way of thinking too.
Good point.
So her whole worldview is already shattering because of that. But now she's stuck, right? Like, I made this thing. If I say, hey, this is a farce, I hurt all these people and my life might be in jeopardy. So I need to do some sort of balancing act where I keep everybody happy. I want my daughter to live her best life, and I want these guys also to live their best life, but I got to do it in two different ways: by lying to them, but telling my daughter the truth.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Nate, on T's communication with her daughter?
Yeah, see, that part confused me too, because when she was talking about the letters, I for a moment forgot who that she was T's daughter. I thought she was a daughter of one of the members, and so when she was talking about, I think like T was saying things like things are happening that I can't tell you about, or something like that. And I was thinking, oh, this is a member that wants to get out. And then I suddenly remembered, like, wait, no, this is, or maybe it said on the screen that this is T's daughter. I'm like, no, this is the leader. So what's that all about? Like, why does she seem to be communicating this something subtly, or where it seems like she maybe doesn't want to be there or something like that. So that was a little bit confusing. And I think there's a sociologist who maybe suggested or speculated that maybe she started to see that things weren't quite what she thought it was, or maybe her heart or mind changed. But then she might have to deal with going home and explaining everything and saying, this is, why did I start this call? Why did I do this? And as opposed to just staying in the cult. And it's funny, when he said that, I could almost understand just sticking with where you already are instead of having to deal with the complication of tearing away yourself from the group, that in having to explain stuff to them, disband them, explain to them why you are leaving, but then to have to go back to your family and explain to them what I mean, how many, after how many years of this, abandoning you after all this long, what was going through my mind, why this was happening, and then having to find a new community, or maybe reconnecting with the community that you left and explaining all that. And I can almost see how that would seem so complicated. And especially if she was sick, maybe that she would just stay where she is, have some semblance of community, so she doesn't have to feel lonely, and just maybe stick it out and play the part. I don't know, maybe that's what she was doing. She was just playing the part,
Right.
pretending to be T, maybe even fooling herself in some way. And maybe when she was writing her letters, she could go into, you know, T's or the mother of her daughter's mode. Um, and you know, maybe that's what it is. And it's, I mean, it's weird because I think that's maybe similar to how you see some pastors, especially like the famous ones who kind of fall from grace, where you find out they have this secret life,
Right.
but then they're a certain way in public. Like I can almost imagine that when they're talking with their parishioners and preaching, that they believe everything that they're saying, or they think they believe that everything they're saying, but then they go home and they're looking at, you know, pornography or whatever, or having an affair.
Right.
And then that's, you know, and they find a way to create these two different versions of themselves and believe that they are both these people. And I almost wonder if that's, you know, if T had just gotten so deep into it and saw no way out of it, that she just decided to maybe find a little bit of way of reaching out to her daughter through the letters, but then staying in the group because that was just the path of what, least resistance or something. And I think she was sick at the time anyway, so maybe she thought she wouldn't have that much time anyway, and it would all be over, which in a way is kind of, you know, well, it seems kind of cowardly. Instead of dealing with everything that she had done, she chose to do what it seems like she chose to do what was just the most comfortable. And a lot of people ended up dying because of it. A lot of people ended up hurt, not just her daughter, but I mean, you have the couple that abandoned their daughter as well. Which she was like, what was she, 12 or something like that? And even one of the guys that killed himself after they had was the father of that girl. So
Yeah, Roxby actually talks a little bit about what you just said. It's talking about the other woman, the daughter of two of the members. She was abandoned repeatedly by her parents, going in and out of the group a few times, and then ultimately committing suicide. That was heart wrenching. To see your parents go in and out, and it's like you have them for a little while. You could treasure the time, and then they go. But the thing is, I think some people don't really grasp that even if they were there with her, it wasn't really her parents. Even they came in and out, because when you have a relationship with your parent prior to leaving a cult, it's a genuine relationship. You care and you love one another, and there's, you guys have conversations, it's really natural. Versus when your parent is in a cult and you communicate with them, there's always that wall there that you can never really communicate the exact same way. So even though her parents were coming in and out of her life, it's not like she had them and then it was great and then they left. They came in, but there was still that kind of that blank facade that a lot of cult people have, because they no longer can think for themselves. They have this porcelain smile and this porcelain skin, like there's no life. Everything has been drained from them. Even there was one girl that they talked about she had really long hair, beautiful young lady, and then when they show her hair cut in her face, she was like totally different. Like the beauty was no longer there, not because she was no longer a beautiful person, but because the life was literally sucked out of her. Like she just isn't the same person, the vibrant person, the big smile, and it was terrible, man. It was terrible. So, I mean, we've been going on about this cult for a little while. So, any final thoughts? Any final thing that you think that we should mention to people who watch this? And I do recommend that all Christians watch this, because I think it's a great docu-series that really captures what happens inside of a cult and how individuals are kind of deceived in a groupthink mentality kind of way. But Nate, what are some of your final thoughts on the documentary overall? Was there anything that really stood out to you, and maybe some final things that you think people should know?
Again, I think this is a documentary everyone needs to see. It's I think it's good to, as you're watching this, just to kind of examine your own faith and ask yourself why you believe what you believe, or why you do what you do. And I think one thing that keeps sticking in my mind is that, you know, these people, they joined the cult because they felt like they found something that they were missing. And I think, you know, one thing is community, one thing is they felt like they were, I think that was a big thing, was community, a sense of belonging. And that, you know, that is something that should be found in a true community of faith in Christ. And I think sometimes that's something that we are lacking in the church, especially, you know, in the American church, where we tend to be more individualistic. And I think we should consider, you know, what it is that we're doing that's maybe pushing some of these people into these cults. And just considering how easy it could be to join something like this. I mean, you know, what's funny was I was watching this, and I was watching the people finding a sense of belonging as they were joining this, and it made me think of how some people, they find a TV show or something that they like Star Trek, which, you know, was mentioned in the show. They go to the conventions and they all bond over this thing of this show that they love. And I've watched some documentaries where it's like, you had a kid who was like, I think, disabled, and he found hope in Star Trek, in the message of Star Trek, and then he went to the conventions and found hope and community and belonging in among the other Trekkies. And I was like, man, this is just a different kind of cult, and this is what they should be getting from the church. And we're kind of failing when we aren't able to give that to them, but some fictional show is of some fictional future. And so I can kind of understand, again, I said this before, I can kind of understand why something like this could be appealing to people, especially if they're really broken. So I think watch this documentary, kind of, I think, just reflect on how you're living out your faith, how you are presenting your faith to other people, why you believe what you believe, consider the basis of your belief, and just remember to do everything that you're doing, you know, out of love. Do it for love for Christ, love for your neighbor, and really just care about your people and consider them, you know, better than yourselves, because you never know how you could be saving somebody's life just in the way you're loving them, because they see the true love of Christ reflected in you, and they don't need to find it in some fake cult. So that's, you know, that's what I think watching this made me kind of realize and reflect on. It's like, I gotta really think about, you know, the way I'm living out my own faith, and also be, you know, understanding why it is I am continuing to be in the faith I am, and not be like, because it could be easy to be like them and say, and not be able to explain, and then go into some Christian chat or go into the bodega and be like, oh, look at these boneheads. I mean, that's literally they were saying in the van. They were like, oh, look at these boneheads. They just don't get it. And I think some of us sometimes do that. It's easy to go into a community and act like, oh, look at these Hebrew Israelites. They don't get it.
Right.
And then other people are, you know, they can leave a comment and, haha, yeah, you're totally right. They don't get it. It's like, do we actually get it? Do we know what they're going through? So yeah, that's kind of what went through my head.
I mean, that was a lot that went through your head. I'm surprised you still have a head on your shoulders, bro.
Yeah.
But it was it was very insightful. I think what you said about individuals thinking more along the lines of, and we've all talked about this to some degree, is when we are helping individuals, ridiculing them is not the solution, but actually you can point out the falsehoods of their doctrine or the foolishness of the doctrine. Right? That's so important. When we expose false doctrines, we're not looking to ridicule or just insult people, right? And of course, listen, it can be really easy. All of us have a sense of humor. We're all funny and we all got jokes. But at the same time, we have to mitigate those jokes and anchor them in, okay, listen, this is not the right thing we should be joking about, because their lives are on the line and we shouldn't be like in back chats joking about them or making fun of them. And we're all guilty to some degree. And so we need to, as Christians, repent, and ask the Lord to guide our conversation so that our words, because it's not about what people hear out there, it's about what God hears, right? And God hears all of our thoughts in our conversation. So we need to be very responsible and we have to take it very seriously. Doesn't mean we can't have a sense of humor, but what we are preaching is got to be the most important thing in the world. No jokes, because Christ is not a joke. He's not a punchline. He is God. So we need to treat him with that same reverence and respect. So, Michelle, what do you think? Any final thoughts about this docu-series and maybe something that the audience should take away from it?
Just if you are in a cult, you can contact anybody on the screen. We will pray with you. We will help walk with you through whatever issue that you may have or whatever you're going through or your thought process while leaving. So you're not alone. You're not by yourself. You have people who will root for you and be in your corner as you are, I guess, deconstructing is the best way to put it. You have people in your corner who will be there for you while you are deconstructing. And also, if you would like me to make you a cool patch,
She just undid everything. She just
right.
That took me all of 2 minutes to make. This really literally took me like 4 minutes. No, but seriously though, like you do have people who's willing to. I'm sorry, SOC. I can't help myself. I like
it's okay. It's okay.
I like to say stuff. But
see, I told you we all have a sense of humor. But go ahead.
but honestly, like legit, I say this every time we talk about cults on the show. You really do have a community of people who will be there for you, walk through this with you. And again, you don't have to go through this alone. We have members who have left cults or left heretical factions. We have members who've been through those things who can understand what you're going through and who can sympathize and empathize with you. So you're not alone. So if you find yourself leaving a cult and you're seeing this video, just know that you can reach out to any of us on this screen. SOC's email will probably be in the description box, or you can email him if you want one of us to actually contact you. You can just put our name in there, and we will be more than happy to contact you back.
Amen. Amen. And just for individuals out there, if you have ever been a part of a cult, and let's say you left and you were an ex-member, I do have an entire series dealing with specific questions and topics that you are going to be dealing with psychologically, spiritually, and physically when you leave a cult. So if you go to my channel, it's not this one, but it's another one called Servant of Christ Ministries, and you go to my playlist titled Cult Hurt, I deal with a lot of questions and topics that I had to deal with when I left the cult I used to be a part of before I became a Christian. And so I just felt in my heart that if I could share some of these insights and wisdom that the Lord has poured into me with other ex-cult members, then perhaps we can really help a lot of people out there. So if you are interested in a playlist that has a lot of information, biblical information, topical information, just go to my playlist on my other channel called Servant of Christ Ministries. Alfredo, you'll have the last word as far as any final thoughts and maybe what Christians can take away from watching a docu-series like this.
There was a scene in the docu-series where they were talking about this booklet that members made, and each page was basically a little saying from an individual member, and one of the pages said, we're not escaping reality, we're running towards reality. Right? And that's the thing, right? One of the basic questions we ask of ourselves is, what I'm doing, is it real? Am I really who I say I am? Is this really the world that I live in? Is this all there is? Is this what reality is supposed to be? And what's happening is you have all these different groups trying to answer that question for people. This is what reality really is. Right? So as Christians, we have to become not only great conveyors of reality via sound doctrine, but through, a sound demonstration of sound doctrine. Because we believe Christianity, because we believe that It's not just so you could be nice, constructive citizens. We're Christians because it's true. It is the ultimate reality, And as believers, it is incumbent upon every person who has made Jesus Lord to be an ambassador. Because that's what you are. You have a ministry. It doesn't matter if you're not a bishop, deacon, forget all that.
Mm-hmm.
You are an ambassador, though, right? And it's your job, it's your responsibility to show people what reality really is. Because if you're not showing them, somebody else is showing their version of reality. So that's my takeaway.
Man, very, very, very good point. And I'll kind of echo that to some degree. The point of cults, and this is something I talked about in the cult series, is to give people a false representation of Christ so that when that false representation fails them, they don't seek the one true Christ because they've been turned off by a false Christ. And that's what I want people to grasp. When individuals are part of cults, they believe that what they're learning about is the true Jesus. And when they see it fall apart, they believe that the true Jesus fell apart and Jesus doesn't exist. And now when somebody like us now wants to come and teach them the gospel, they have this perverted image of Jesus and they automatically reject you. This is why, going based on what Alfredo said earlier, we have to be good image bearers, good representatives, because the only thing they've seen is a false representative. So we have to give them that picture of a true representative so that at least they learn what Jesus is really like, so they can make a real sound decision. But in the meantime, they can't because they don't know who he is. So make sure that when you guys go out there and, whether you're at Comic-Con or whether you're walking the street, because Michelle says she's for the streets, or whether you're Nate and me, being nerds, we have to be good representatives of Jesus first, above all. So with that said, let me just talk about this really quickly. So for everybody out there, if this is your first time here again, make sure you guys click that like button, make sure you share the video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more future content. And we are going to review a couple of things coming up in the future. But just so you know, this Wednesday at 9 p.m., I'm going to be joined by apologist in Detroit. We're going to be reviewing Gattaca. Very interesting film. This was actually my first time watching the film just a couple of days ago, and I was pretty surprised about how really good it was. So if you're interested in that conversation, make sure you join us here Wednesday at 9 p.m. And of course, next Monday, we're going to be reviewing Surviving R. Kelly. And you do not want to miss when we do a review on Surviving R. Kelly. So with that said, I want to say I love you all. God bless you. Keep following Christ. And make sure you subscribe to Real Reviews as we examine films through a Christian lens. So until next time, God bless, take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.